Welcome back to All Outdoors Photography Podcast, where we share experiences out in the field and educate others through landscapes, wildlife, macro, and more, with other photographers from around the world.
Yes, we have Rinzi Ruiz on the show today. He's a Los Angeles-based freelance Fujifilm photographer and global ambassador. He's best known for his street and urban photography that focuses on light and shadow, as well as the human condition. So welcome, Rinzi. We've never actually had a street or urban photographer on the show before. So can you explain to those listening what exactly is a street photograph in your own terms?
Sure. First off, thanks for having me, guys. Good to be with you, Henry and Ryan. As far as my work goes, yes, I do. I started off doing a lot more street photography when I started learning about the camera and sort of photography in general. But I did, try other things, but that sort of piqued my interest. And really, what it's about is walking around your neighborhood or a city area. It doesn't necessarily have to be those things, but that's where I found myself at, walking around, taking candid photos of people going about their business and trying to show them in a sort of for my way a very artistic, very sort of kind of stylized way, which is when I started, it was a lot of black and white, high sort of a high contrast black and white, not all of it. Um, but yeah, just walking around downtown LA and getting to know my city a little more and learning my cameras at the same time. So that's sort of how it all got started for me.
Awesome. Yeah. So where are you actually based? And kind of where did you start out with that?
Sure, I'm in the LA area. I'm just about 20 minutes north of downtown LA in a city called Glendale, and it doesn't take that long to get there. Depending on traffic, but once I'm there, it's good. We have sunshine all year round, almost. We had a couple of cloudy and rainy days, but I mean, right now it's getting. The other day in the valley it was about 90 degrees already. It's about 75 to 80 today. But yeah, I mean, I started off with point and shoot camera. This is back in like 2009, 2010 ish, around that time, and then got into sort of the gear reviews and trying to figure out what cameras are good to use. Obviously, a lot of people were going, "Hey, there's Leica and and of course the ones that was more familiar with were Canon and Nikon." And so I started looking at reviews on those and picked up a D90 to begin with a kit lens, and then after that it was just seeing reviews about bokeh and so I started getting into lenses that were uh, pretty fast, 1.4s and 1.8s, things like that, and walking around downtown and just kind of figuring it out, what exposure was and how each of the focal lengths that I had, how it saw and how it photographed things, and slowly just found street photography, looked it up, and there wasn't really a lot back then with regards to street photography, as far as like people who blogged about it, people who talked about it, not even like certain websites that taught sort of general photography or like photography type school websites. Maybe there'd be a little blurb about it, but that would be it. And so throughout the years, met a lot of people who also was really into street photography, and it's sort of a specific thing. It's a specific genre, not probably suitable for everybody. I think everybody could do it, but some people just it's not their thing. And I totally get that. I had friends that were doing landscape photography. I had friends that were doing, dog photography and things like that. Like earlier on, this is before I got into the whole community of street photographers and started meeting way more people that were also into other genres. But yeah, earlier on, it was just like they didn't get kind of what I was doing because it was a little odd, like going around taking pictures of people you don't know, right?
Hmm.
It is kind of a weird thing.
Yeah.
Uh, it's voyeuristic, and I guess in a way, and it is odd. But if you look back at some of the great masters, right, the classic masters of photography, uh, uh, Roy DeCarava and some of the guys like Elliot Erwitt and stuff like that, where they just walked around and documented the things around them in the way that they saw it. And we're looking at the pictures now and we're going, oh wow, that's a good representation of what it was like, in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, of just average normal people walking around doing their daily thing versus very stylized, almost prepped and very purposefully done photos of things of those times, right? It's sort of a different part of society. It's a different class systems and things like that we're seeing, depending on who's taking the pictures. And so when I got into it, I was very much influenced by the black and white photography, and thought, well, I'll start in black and white and then I'll work my way into color, kind of just how history, went with black and white and then going into color film. And so, yeah, I focused my time just, doing black and white photography for just about a year. Literally just took black and white photos, got my eyes used to seeing in black and white. Actually asked one of my mentors during, like, before I even took that year to just focus on that, how I could see better in black and white, or just how do I see in black and white. And I was like, do I wear a specific pair of glasses? Like, what can I do? And he was like, just focus on the light. And it sort of struck me, like blew my mind almost. Just how just how simple the concept was, but also just like, wow, okay, that's all I need to do. And so that's what I did. I just focused on light, and light became a very important part of my photography, my learning of photography, and the style of photography that I like and gravitate towards. And it's helped me with my professional photography as well. With weddings and events and things like that.
Mhm.
Just making sure that my images have that sort of aspect in it, right? Because it creates depth, it creates emotion, it can just add so much more to the image. I mean, we can't have photography without light, anyways, and so it just might as well figure out how to use it and how to enhance my photos using light. And I talked to a lot of landscape photographers as well, and wildlife photographers, and that's why we do what golden hour, right? Golden hours both in the morning and in the evening.
Mhm.
It's just really super, really nice light. So at the same time with portrait photographers, and especially if you're using more available light or natural light, however you want to say that. It's really nice light. So that's kind of what I focused on, and my street photography style grew from that, and starts folks started seeing my work and featuring me on their blogs and podcasts and things like that earlier on, and that helped me to become known for my photography, and just sort of meeting more people in the community. I mean, I know people now, and I've become friends with them as well, right? It was just like started off on Flickr and then Instagram, and then we're talking, they're like, hey, I'm in LA, let's meet up, and so we're shooting street together. I'm if I'm in another city, I'm hitting up folks and saying, hey, or they're saying, hey, come, we'll show you around. So it's been a great experience getting into photography, getting into street photography. And there's a lot of again, like I said, there's other, like, people who are doing street photography, but they're also landscape photographers, wedding photographers, portrait photographers, fashion photographers. So early on, I got to meet all these people and get an insight to what they did, because they'd be like, hey, come and check it out, like be my assistant for a day, or just hang out and watch. And so that was a really good experience for me to meet all those people. Very insightful, um, very helpful in sort of figuring out what I wanted to do with photography. Because as much as I love doing street photography, there's an aspect of it, especially at that time, coming from, I did graphics for a living, and once I got laid off from that work, I was like, okay, what do I do now? And photography was just a good medium to learn and to sort of create art with. And then, yeah, so I was like, okay, so how do I how do I make money doing this and assisting folks doing weddings and events like that? I was like, okay, I could get into this. I can learn this, and slowly over time, I got better, and not just using available light, but using strobes and soft boxes, and just I love photography, so I wanted to learn about that part of it as well, and meet meeting more people and learning more from them as well.
It's awesome. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there in what you said. I was, stepping back to what you said at the beginning about photographing strangers. So probably a lot of our listeners, they probably are used to photographing like the landscapes and wildlife, of course, much more solitude and isolated experiences in photography. So was it a obstacle that you had to overcome with that, and if so, like how did you do it?
Absolutely. So my whole what became my my blog or something like that for a little bit during the beginning, because I thought that's what I wanted to do, was called Street Zen, and it was because my first few months out walking around downtown and Chinatown and Hollywood and all these kind of touristy places where I felt just a little bit of comfort being around, walking around with a camera and taking pictures of people. But really, what I found out is that it's 90% mental. I mean, that's kind of with everything that I've realized over the last few years. Just everything is 90% mental. You can get your mental game down with whatever you're doing, then you can get better at what you're doing, and you can accomplish more. And so that's kind of what I focused on while I was also learning the camera. I was learning about focal length and shutter speed and aperture and ISO and then processing stuff in Lightroom, etc. I was also learning how to do the mental part of it in sort of the physical part of it too, because when you think of something, a lot of times you feel something, right? You think about something that you don't like, you get a bodily reaction to it. If you're thinking somebody's gonna punch you, you kind of get nervous, you get anxious. So there's a lot of that kind of walking around downtown LA, not knowing what somebody might say or do. I've heard people have bad reactions from people, and so I, of course, I didn't want that to happen to me, and so that was in the back of my head the whole time, and so it made walking around taking pictures a very uncomfortable thing, and that I wasn't having fun doing it all of a sudden. And I said, "Well, I'm trying to do this to relax, to have fun, to learn something new, and all I'm walking around doing is being nervous because I keep thinking about what somebody might say, what somebody might do, and so that's where I focused my mind on was, okay, well, there's this whole thing called mindfulness and meditation, and these people are, all these gurus talking about all this stuff, and I only touched the surface of it, kind of at that point. It was just like, okay, well, what they tell you is to breathe. Okay, so let me walk around and just do that. I'll just just focus on my breathing, and I'm not gonna overthink it. I'm just gonna walk around and focus on my breathing and see how that goes. And it actually worked. It relaxed me a lot more, obviously, because when you're anxious or if you're nervous, you're a little bit shorter of breath, and so focusing on my breathing totally helped. And it and then so the mental part, instead of thinking about, well, what's this person's going to say, what is this person going to do, I was like, well, I'm not a mind reader, I'm not a psychic either. I don't know what anybody's going to do until they do it. And so I was like, okay, well, let me just focus on if somebody does something, then, I'll react in a, very calm way. But as I'm walking around, instead of thinking of all the things that can go wrong or all the bad things that can happen, I just started focusing on, okay, well, what angle of this shot do I want to use? What kind of picture do I want to get today? What camera, what lens? Where's the light coming from? Like just all the creative part of it that I really kind of wanted to focus on anyways. So I just started focusing on that instead. And all those other thoughts and trying to predict what somebody says or does or whatever just started to slowly go away. I became a lot more, again, a relaxing, fun thing to do. And I still enjoy it till today, right? Like I still walk around and, some of those initial feelings of like anxiety sometimes comes out a little bit, when I'm looking at somebody going, but then instead of it being like, I'm wondering what they're going to say, I'm more anxious of like, oh, am I going to get this shot? Am I going to get it right at the right moment that I want? Because a lot of street photography is capturing a specific moment, right? And so, it was more of that. It was just the excitement of it versus anxiety. So yeah, I've come a long way from when I started. I've sort of taught this to a lot of people as well over time. I do one-on-one street photography workshops in downtown LA, and a lot of it is, over almost the last 8 years or so, a lot of people have come and said, hey, that's the part of it that I want to focus on, because I can't get to the learning part because I'm so nervous and I'm so anxious and I'm so worried about somebody's going to yell at me, and a lot of these people, and I'm not like a super outgoing extrovert type of person. I'm not always talking to people, there's a shy part of me. There's a a part of me that's not as outgoing. And so to do that was a hurdle to go over. And for a lot of people that is. And so this is the way that I show up. Just number one, start with the breathing. Totally helps. It helps with everything, actually. If I'm doing a presentation or if I'm, about to go into an event, or I'm about to start my whole day of, an 11-hour wedding day, I'm going to start my day with some breathing and, certain techniques that I've learned over the years, and get my mind in the right place, get my thinking, in the right place. And then the whole day just goes well. That's really helped a lot. And then, I was able to focus on getting better at getting angles, getting my moments, getting just my mind's more, I'm listening more to my intuition, because I'm not distracted by just random thoughts that don't help. So, yeah, that's about how that went down.
Yeah, that's great. And it's pretty neat how you mentioned with like the shift you had mindset of like, you're so hung up and worried about what people may think of you, but then it's like you really got more, you said anxious, but I think it's more like an excited creative possibility of like what the photograph or composition will, pan out to be, of course. So is your approach more about candid moments, or are you more unafraid to like stage some of your shots?
Well, I mean, I don't ever pose people, or it depends, right? Because there's street photography, which for me is mainly candid, and there's another aspect of it, which is street portraiture, and so that's something different. And I might move somebody from where they're standing to get a better shot, get a better light situation, and then I'll just chat with them until I see the moment that I want to, take a photo of. Or some people are very good at, having their picture taking. In fact, most of the street portraits that I've taken over the last, 8-9 years have been from people approaching me.
Oh, wow.
Which is kind of weird. But, what I think is the reason why people approach me is because I stopped being nervous. I stopped producing an energy, because for me it's a lot of it's about energy as you walk around. If you're afraid, if you're anxious, if you're timid, if there's any of those feeling like you're doing something creepy, people sense that, right? Like you're sitting in a room, somebody angry walks in the room, that the back of your, the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. It's that kind of feeling that you get if somebody's walking around thinking like that and taking pictures like that. And so, I definitely didn't want that to be the case for myself. And so I focused on having good energy, positive energy, an energy of having fun. And so if you're having fun and you're walking around, having a good time, taking pictures, then people are sort of attracted to you, and they're like, hey, what are you doing? Who are you taking pictures of? Some people are like, are you paparazzi? I'm like, look at the camera that I have. It's not a paparazzi camera, but they want to see what kind of fun that you're having. And some people have joined me on the photo, on the photo walk, just because of that. I feel like that's what it is. Like there's just certain energy that if you're having a good time and you're happy, I think that just invites people. But yeah, so the street portraiture, there's the candid part of it. And so, what I've taught quite a few people who are coming from landscape or wildlife. And this is what I tell them. I say, when you go out and you think about going and take pictures of a location, right? You kind of research it online and you kind of get a sense of the location. You get a sense of the time of day you want to go, and you go and you go there and you do it. And so I say, well, just take sort of the same mentality that you have for doing that, because you already know photography, right? You guys know photography, the focal length you want to use, the aperture and shutter speed and the ISO you guys want to use. Well, find a place in the city that has a nice sort of setting, and that's essentially what I do for a good number of my photographs. I just find a nice area where the light is good and watch as people walk by and walk through and interact with each other in that sort of, I guess, for the lack of a better term, it's a stage, a set piece, like a TV set. And I'm just watching actors kind of walk through it and engage with each other. And then when I feel like it, or when my intuition tells me to, I'll take the picture. I'll take a few pictures standing in one sort of one perspective of that set or that stage. And then let's say I look at my screen and I'm like, okay, well, maybe if I move a couple steps to the left or a couple steps forward or back, or get a higher angle, I might get something more dynamic, or whatever. So yeah, I mean, that's sort of what I tell them, and it kind of eases their nervousness, and they're able to go out and do it themselves, because shooting with me is a different thing versus going out all of a sudden you're by yourself, and sort of all those thoughts come back. Oh no, I'm nervous, and these people are looking at me now because I'm taking pictures. Now what do I do? And you start sweating, and you're like, oh, I gotta walk away now, and then you miss the shot. So, for me, it's all those things kind of put together: just breathing and finding a good place, setting your camera up, and then waiting for the right moment to take a picture.
Mm-hmm. And is that right moment always a person? Like, do you ever find like a car that passes through the frame, or maybe a dog?
Sometimes,
or
yeah.
is it?
Sometimes a dog, a bird. There's there's wildlife in the city as well. We got a lot of pigeons and squirrels and yeah, people walking their dogs and things like that. So sometimes just a monkey, it's a pet monkey, or
Monkey, really? Wow.
Yeah, I've seen some odd things. People bring out. I think ferrets are illegal in California, but I've seen those.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, somebody, what was it? It was a pet pig. Somebody was walking their pet pig. So it's just like, you never know, right? It's LA. People, So sometimes, yeah, it doesn't have necessarily have to be. That's the thing, a lot of people online will argue and discuss street photography and what's the ethics of it, and what institute does it have to be a person in it? Can it just be um, you know sort of urban landscape? Is that considered street photography? I mean, it's got to be. I think what a lot of people are looking for with regards to street photography is what is the moment there, right? What is there? Is there a juxtaposition? Is there what's being told? And so people will argue online all day, and I'm not about that. I'm My whole perspective on this whole street photography thing is, for me, it's about the going out and taking pictures, right? It's what got me into it, and it's what kept me doing it. It's enjoying the act of walking around taking pictures, not sort of having any plan of what I'm gonna see or take pictures of. It's the improv of it all. I'm improvising as I'm going along, trying to come up with things on the spot. Okay, well, here's somebody walking towards me. I like this lighting. I like the background. Okay, do I stand to the left? Do I stand to the right? What setting do I use? All these things, all in kind of one moment. I've got to get it all right, and then I got to take the picture. And sometimes I get it, sometimes I don't. And so that's what makes, I think, street photography easy and also hard at the same time. Is that you can go around, and I've seen it, just folks walking around taking pictures of any random thing, and then saying, yeah, this is street photography. Okay, sure. But what makes, like, some of the people more well known, what made them well known, is because of the way that they sort of saw it and the way they framed it, the timing of it.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of they put themselves into it as well, and so that's also a part of it.
Yeah, you're
I think
like you're
what more
basically
people choose,
setting the stage for the perfect moment. You're finding the good
that's right.
light, and then you're kind of waiting for the
That's right.
subject to get into that stage.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
We're not trying to like manipulate it, so to speak, but yeah, just letting whatever that scene is like unfold before you and the camera too.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, and that's why there's some famous photographers out there who, they're like, "Oh, I'm a street photographer," and then they'll do like a YouTube video, and they're like telling people, "Oh, stand this way," and you know, talk to this, or just trying to tell them what to do, and they're like, "Well, then that's not street photography anymore. You're basically just doing, a photo session with a couple. You're not doing street photography anymore." But again, it's a loose, again, the definition for me is mainly candid and set in a sort of a public place. But there's street photographers that they're not in the city, right? They don't live in the nearest city. They're sort of out in the boondocks or whatever, and they're able to create something that's has a street feel to it, and communicates as a street photograph. And so a lot of people accept that as or some people do beach photography, and there's just the way that they've framed it and timed it, and the contents of whatever's in their photo, it speaks as a street photograph, and so it's been accepted as a street photograph. And then there's a lot of stuff where people are like, this is street photograph. I was in the public street. There's a candid photo and blah, blah, blah. And they're just like, well, it's not really. Like the community will be like, no, that's not a street photograph. I mean, that's been said about a lot of my work too. So, I mean, that's why I'm not out there arguing with them. Like, yes, my work is street photography, or it's not street photography. Like, for me, I
So
really don't care. It's about the process.
why do you think that people make that distinction and try to like define what street photography is?
I think it's because it's changed over time, and also because it has to be hard. There has to be a because otherwise then everybody would just be doing street photography, like everybody, even with just cell phones and people who have no um, skills in photography, right? Or at least what we think of as, learning how to use a camera, that kind of thing. And there's actually a lot of people out there who are great street photographers are using their iPhones, and don't have. So I'm
Yeah.
negating what I'm just saying right now as well, because there's a whole kind of so I what I would say is it's sort of folks are trying to define it, and folks are trying to narrow it down
Hmm.
so that it can become something, or that to describe something that they can then put in a box and say, well, this is what it is, and only photos that match this description are can be considered a street photograph, right?
Hmm.
And then you can say, well, then we can make books out of it, and we could sell workshops and kinds of stuff that say, well, I'm going to teach you what real street photography is, and then we're going to have galleries and sell books and this and so there's parts of it. There's a lot of different parts of and different reasons why people would say, well, this is what it is and this is what it isn't. um I don't want to say it's an elitism type of thing, but there's some of that, I'm
Hmm.
sure, you know just like with any other, I'm sure, genre, right?
Oh yeah, for sure, definitely.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
matter of making sense of what it is really and trying to put it in a
Yeah,
box. Yeah.
Hmm.
yeah. But also it helps, right? Because if I'm learning it, I'm like, well, what is it?
Yeah.
Then
Right.
somebody
What
will
do
say,
you
well, this
call
is what
it?
it is,
Uh huh.
and then I can work towards shooting that way. You
Yeah,
know?
and
Right.
you almost have to self-define it yourself. Like, what do I want to take when I think of
Yeah,
a street photo?
yeah,
Hmm.
exactly.
Yeah. That's
And then
part of the
once you
reason why
learn
I
the
wanted.
rules, it's then you can break it. Like, that's why I don't try to argue, because it's such a different thing for so many different people,
Yeah.
depending on their type of creativity, where they live, where they come from, what type of photos they want to produce. And so I don't want to put it in like, a lot of people will be like, well, street portraiture is sort of like, you're doing it on the street. It's street photography and da 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 da. Um and some people who are like, no, it's 100% candid, and you can't have portraits within that genre of photography. Well, I understand why they're saying that, because it is kind of two different things,
Uh huh.
right?
Right. Two different types of
Whether
street.
Yeah, while you're one is going around and you're kind of to yourself and you're just observing things and taking, trying to get the best moment and framing and whatever it is that you're trying to do here. And then on the other side, you're more engaged with talking to people, right? You're maybe, depending on the type of portrait you're taking, you're using a longer focal length, right? You're maybe using an 85 or 50 or what have you, versus a lot of street photographers. Well, I would say, at least a lot of them will shoot more of like a 35 millimeter full frame equivalent, and or wider, right? Depending on where they are at. I feel
Hmm.
like in LA, it's like a 50 millimeter area here. For me, anyways, that's as far as how I shoot.
So you're on 50 millimeter.
Yeah, well, for the Fujifilm line of lenses, it's the 35 millimeter.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Yeah, because of the crop
the crop
factor.
sensor. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
And so yeah, and that's just because we're a little bit more spread apart out here. People are mostly in cars. It's not a pedestrian um, society here in LA for the most part. Unlike, I love going to New York and Tokyo and England and going to these, city centers that are a lot more pedestrian friendly and that they're a little more crowded.
Hmm.
So a wider angle is going to help you. A 28, a 24 is great for that kind of stuff, because you're literally right next to somebody, the whole time as you're walking around. Versus here, there's arm's length and a few more arm's length between people. So for me, I like using a slightly longer focal length, 35, or I'll bring out the 56 millimeter, which is sort of an 85 equivalent.
Hmm.
And I like the compression. I like the look of that. And
Yeah.
so, again, I restrict people from, hey, don't, street photography is only wide angle lens. Nah, man. Like, I've used the 90 millimeter, which is a 135 equivalent. I'm not gonna restrict people from using whatever tools that they own. You
Mhm.
know, just as long as they're having fun. That's what it is for me anyway.
Yeah,
It's
for
just all
sure.
about having fun. And the pictures are, they come, they one, going out for one day, I might not get any photos that I like, which is fine. And then one day I'll get like 4 or 5 just because, the light is good, the groove, the place, the people walking around. Um, and, I'm snapping really good shots here and there.
Mhm.
So it's like kind of like fishing.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get
Some
the
days you get
catch,
some.
and sometimes you
Yeah.
don't.
I do have a question about the lenses and like the camera you use, Rinzi. Like, is it pretty discreet? Because I have heard from street photographers they like kind of that more low profile rather than like a big DSLR or a big mirrorless camera.
Yeah. It helps. I mean, because
Mhm.
for me, it only helps so far as I've got to carry it around all day.
Yeah.
So if I'm gonna be walking around for like 4 or 5 hours, I'd rather it be a lighter camera. A lot of street photographers are more of it's got to be a daily camera, right? An EDC sort of thing.
Mhm.
And so, like for example, the X100V, the most recent X100 version, is great. Is great, and you don't even have to think about the lens that you got to slap on there because it's already on there. It's a 23 millimeter, so it's a 35 equivalent. It's very diverse focal length. It's and so that's all you would need. Just that one camera and one lens. Walking around everywhere, you can have it on you all the time. It looks good if you if you have it on a camera strap around your neck. It looks like an old film camera, especially if you get the silver and black version. Um, and so yeah, the smaller cameras are good, and it also, yes, sometimes doesn't attract as much attention. Especially like the black version won't attract as much attention if you're like pointing cameras at certain thing versus of course D850 with a 70-200 or like a
Right.
16 to 55 or whatever focal length zoom lens out there. It's a lot bigger, but I think at the same time it doesn't matter. I've walked around with the D7, when I had some Nikon gear, um, D700 with a 135 millimeter, walking around with that. It was a lot. It was a lot to carry, and again, it was more because, um, at the end of the day, I was like, man, that was a lot to carry all day, versus my X Pro 2 and now X Pro 3 with even the 56 millimeter on there. It's a lot lighter than DSLR setup. And so for me, it was more about the weight and being able to carry something a little more lightweight and I could put in a little bag, versus like people noticing me because I was really trying not to think about that anymore. So for me, it doesn't matter what camera you use. Um, but I do also accept that yes, certain cameras will get you certain attention, but at the same time, you can, for me, it's just like, well, then you got attention, and then what? Just get the picture and then walk off. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, for
Right.
sure.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely smaller. I mean, that's why the iPhone is great, and the X100, and even like the XT3, and a lot of their the XE4, which I tested over the pandemic. That one's a really small one that's really nice, and then you can change the lenses on that. But that one with the 27 millimeter is a great walk around sort of kind of camera. It's just, yeah, again, like most people who are getting into street photography, they're gonna get it into it, and they wanna bring a camera with them everywhere. So a smaller, lightweight one is gonna be better for that kind of thing versus like a hunk of metal and plastic DSLRs and um, big lenses and stuff like that. But that's really what it comes down to for me.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I wanted to touch upon the compositional techniques you use. So I know you mentioned you do lots of candid and you lean towards that style, but do you ever like stand around and wait for like a person or subject to walk into a scene just because like the light or composition
That's right.
looks good?
That's right. Yep. That's when I'm talking to landscape photographers, that's basically all I tell them. I say, just find a place in the city, stand there for a while, because there's certain photographs that I have. I've waited around like 45 minutes at one spot to get that shot. I mean, not that I was just waiting for that one shot. I was trying the whole time, taking shots here and there, maybe a different angle, maybe you may be trying it, portrait orientation, maybe trying a landscape orientation, and just waiting for the right person to come along. Because yeah, the light is good. I know, maybe it's a more of a graphical image, so there's certain lines and like the shadows are making lines, and the lights allowing for certain um uh yeah, lines and shadows to sort of help make the scene look more interesting. And I'm using that, and I'm just waiting for somebody to whether it's a silhouette or a larger part of the person to be in the shot. I'm just waiting. There's certain ones where it's a little bit closer, so I'm using maybe a 50, sorry, not closer, but like a tighter shot with the 56, or like an 85 millimeter or 135, where I'm a little bit more further away to frame, because of my framing needs to be a certain way. So I'm kind of way a little bit further back, but yeah, just waiting for the right person to come along, and I'm taking a variety of shots, and then one person who's maybe dressed a certain way, or is running through instead of just walking through, or I'm looking for a little bit of more interest than just people walking. um a lot of it's people walking, but trying to find something that adds to it than just them walking through a scene. But yeah, you can wait for half an hour. Soon maybe the light will change, and then I'll walk off to another place. So, and earlier on, I would walk around all day, like literally just be walking. And at the end of the day, my feet are tired and I'm sore. And once I figured out, I watched the video from Joel Meyerowitz, who's a New York street photographer, quite famous. And he was being interviewed. Probably the interview was done in the 80s. I watched it on YouTube. And he was just standing on the street corner in New York, and he was like, "What's great about this is, everybody comes to me. I'm just standing here, and you see these." He's telling the interview like, "Yeah, look at these people coming through, and then these people coming through, and then they're gonna talk to each other, maybe interact, and then walk their separate ways." There's a lot of action going on the street corner, so I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna try that in downtown LA. I'm just gonna go stand on the street corner for 20 minutes, half an hour, and see what happens." And it was fruitful. He was right. A lot of people come and interact and say goodbye or say hello. And as long as the it's a corner, there's certain corners in downtown LA that some of my friends, they're like, "Oh, we knew to find you here because the light is good there." I'm gonna be shooting there. And for me, it's like, well, I'm using the same light, I'm using the same location, but if I angle it slightly different, it's a different person, it's a totally different picture than the one that I took the day before. So there's that aspect of it as well, where for practicing purpose and for getting a shot, I can go to the same place, same location over and over again, and come up with something slightly different each time. So it's a good exercise to try if there's something you're trying to get into. Just find somewhere. It also helps with the comfort part of it, and to get used to not being nervous and being anxious and things like that. It's just to go stand at a busy corner, busy sidewalk, and just observe it, observe the light, observe the people, take pictures here and there. Um, you know, it helps with a lot of stuff. So
Yeah. I mean, if you return to a composition, which is a great aspect, I think, like you said, of like practicing photography itself. Do you ever like run into the same
yeah,
people on the street?
I do. Yeah, some people I've not consciously taken pictures of over and over again. I just sometimes I remember the faces, sometimes I don't. And some people, yeah, I'm like, oh, I just took a picture of this guy like you know, 4 or 5 months ago, and here he is again in another one of my photos. So yeah, it does happen. Like there's people I recognize. They'll never recognize me, but you know, I've taken a picture of them and I've seen their face. I stared at their face for about 5 minutes, you know, as I'm going through editing photos. And so as I'm walking around downtown, I'll recognize them, but I'm not like going up to, hey, what's up, dude? Like, no,
Right.
I just keep walking. I'm like, okay, you know, they're just one of the characters of downtown LA for me.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet a lot of people think of like street photography as being like you mentioned, like on the move and like you're always just kind of the hustle and bustle of city life, I guess. But yeah, it's neat how
Yeah.
you really kind of just take a step back and just observe of the surroundings and just the way people are moving around and everything too.
Yeah. Yeah. I've explained it as sort of two types, you know, kind of relating to hunting, right? There's hunters who just walk around all day and they're finding their prey. They're, you know, running around finding their prey. And then there's some that just hide and wait and then pounce when the, you know, the time is right. And so I feel like I'm, you know, I've done a little bit of both. You know, especially if I'm in a new city, it's hard. It's hard to stay in one place if you're, you know, in a new city and you're learning and you just like, do I stop here? Where do I go? Where do I stop? Yeah, I mean, I guess to start off, you might be just walking around everywhere, and then you'll get more familiar with the city that you're walking around in, and you'll find the little spots of light. Because really, for me, also some, you know, I'll be in another country, and they're like, "Oh, you got to see, you know, this landmark or whatever," and I'm like, "Yeah, I'll walk around and I'll find little, you know, pockets of light and pockets of character that speak to me." Instead of you know, whatever main thing. I'll go see it. Like for example, the Eiffel Tower. I went to go see the Eiffel Tower, but then I went around just some random places that I'm sure no one else cared about. And I was like, that's interesting to me, and the light was good, so I just waited around that for as long as I could until the tour kept going. So yeah,
Yeah, and to like the locals, maybe they're probably so used to a lot of those, even the kind of the off the beaten path kind of places. But to you, it's like this almost like this whole new world, of course, when you drop in this new place or location.
that's right. That's right.
Mhm. Yeah. So a lot of your images, they're strong examples of like hard lighting and high contrast scenes. Like you said earlier at the beginning of the show, lots of sunny days, of course, in LA. How do you handle, I guess, that kind of higher contrast of the light?
Well, so when I was trying to figure out the type of photographs I wanted to make, I was looking at a lot of photo books, and there's a book by a photographer named Ray K. Metzger called Light Lines, and I was flipping through the book, and there was one photograph specifically with a car, and there was a lady in it, like, you know, nothing super special, but it spoke to me, and I realized at that point those are the kind of photographs that I want to make. And then I was like, well, how did he do it? And I said, okay, well, what focal length do I think he's shooting with? What ISO do I think he's shooting with? And what shutter speed? Why did he choose the landscape orientation versus portrait orientation? And then I went out and tried to replicate that photo. I mean, it was a photo from I believe the 40s and the 50s. Might have been later. I can't remember right now. Um, and it was shot on film, and you know, so it's a different time and a different place and a different camera and all that kind of stuff. But you know, I can guess and try to get it with my Fujifilm camera. So at the time, I think I was probably shooting with the X Pro One with the 35 millimeter 1.4, and just walking around trying to get that sort of look. And I knew it wasn't going to be at 1.4; it was going to be around 5.6 or f8, a little more depth of field there. And then I was like, okay, well, where's the sun coming from? And so you can kind of tell in every photo where the light's coming from. And so I was like, okay, well, it's kind of this time of the day, and then I just started shooting at the light, and I was like, oh, okay, well then I was like, okay, at f8, okay, that's fine. It's sunny, so I'm gonna go ISO 200, And then I said, okay, well, I want to stop motion because people are walking. So 500th of a second is pretty good. And so that turned out to be like my base setting for the quality of light that I got in downtown LA. I'd walk out my car, I set it to ISO 200 f8, 500th of a second. I look in my viewfinder, and the exposure was just about where I wanted it to be. And so if I'm focused on a specific value of light, I don't have to change that setting, and I could just shoot all day kind of with that setting. Maybe adjust, at noon it gets a lot brighter, so maybe I'll speed up my shutter or stop down a little bit on my aperture. Um, but that's it. I don't, obviously if I'm gonna try to shoot wide open, then it's a little different, and I have to balance it all out. But generally, that was my setting. I'd walk around with that, and I'll just be focused on the value of light that I want. So you won't see me in the shade really taking pictures as much.
Mhm.
I'm just yeah, it's just more using the type of sun that, and again, get a lot of light here, and so I can walk around all day with literally those base settings and kind of changing it up a little bit and get really good photographs all day.
Yeah, it's nice to kind of not have to worry about the settings nonstop and just really focus
Yeah,
on that composition, and kind of
that's
the
right.
angle of the light too. So
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and observing and making sure I get the shot at the right moment. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I remember being taught early on about Sunny F16. I'm not sure if you've heard of that little technique, but
Yep.
yeah, the little
Yep.
benchmarks too for like a mid high noon sun kind of day.
yeah,
That's right. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, because a lot of the film cameras back then were, didn't have meters, or you'd get one and the meter is broken, so you're just like, all right, or the battery's dead and you can't replace the battery, but the camera still works mechanically, and the only thing the battery was for the meter and the little blinking lights in the viewfinder. And so yeah, a lot of people would still use the film camera, um, but depending on the film stock they're using, yeah, they would start with the with f16 or f8, and then just go from there.
Awesome. So as we wrap up the show here, Rinzi, I just want to ask one more question here. What is the craziest or most memorable story you've had when out shooting?
Wow. um
Take it however
you
you
know
want
what,
to.
I would say just, for me, the experiences with friends, like people that I've met, because there haven't been really, again, like I don't get approached a lot. I don't get yelled at. So okay, I'll say one story about, and it's not even the bad one, really. I because I wasn't even taking a picture of the person, and this has happened like two or three times where I'm taking a picture, pointing, obviously not pointing it in that person's direction, pointing in a completely different direction, and then the guy comes up to me and literally yells right in my face, "What the f are you doing? Don't take a picture of me. I want you to delete that." Da, 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 da. Just yelling and yelling and yelling. And I'm looking at him like, I didn't even see you there. I didn't even see you there. I didn't take a picture of you. I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, I was looking over there, buddy. And try to you de-escalate and all that kind of stuff. But really, for me, it's mostly been a very good experience. So for me, it's meeting up with people in New York, other street photographers, and being able to shoot the street with them around there and vibing with them. My first trip to Japan was probably a really memorable one. Met a lot of good people out there, and I got to shoot around in Tokyo, which is an amazing place to do street photography. So yeah, those for me are the memorable and sort of fun experiences that I've had, just because I do street photography, just because I like doing it, and I like the cameras that I'm using, and I love Fujifilm cameras. So and there's a whole community of people who shoot with that as well. So uh yeah, overall it's just that the fun, the being able to meet people and talk shop, and talk about other people's work and our work and things like that. So
Yeah, it's great to hear there's a whole community fostered around that kind of genre, and you guys all celebrate and shoot together, and that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. So we appreciate you coming on tonight, Rinzi. So where's the best place for people to look at your work?
Sure. The most active is on Instagram, which is at Rinzi Zen, spelled RINZIZEN. And then from there, you send me a message if you want to, I have my website, obviously, rinziruizphotography.com. But that's more for my wedding and, headshots and events and stuff like that. I have some of my street photography there. Earlier on, before I even got started in any work, all I had was street photography on there. And my sister was like, you got to put other things on there because I'm recommending you for weddings and all they're seeing is like random people on the street. So you got to put something different. And so, so I've changed that quite a bit over the last years. And hopefully, people can see that as well now that I do other things besides street photography.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks so much, Rinzi. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for watching the Owl Outdoors Photography Podcast. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and the video version on YouTube as well. You can subscribe down below, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thank you.